Navigating sugar addiction is the hardest part of getting started fasting. It's the hardest part because the sugar is the fuel that your brain prefers, and that's why we crave sugar and not steak or sausage or beef unless it's served with something that is carby. But of course, let's not be too extremist. Let's recognize that what we already know is that sugar is the big offender in terms of weight gain. That's true for men and women. It's true whether you're a low carber or not a low carber. It doesn't matter. I'm certainly not a low carber, and yet I recognize carb consciousness. The understanding that if you drink a milkshake, if you eat ice cream, if you eat cake, then that's going to put your pancreas through its paces. It's going to work your metabolism, and it's going to cause you to start retaining water. It's going to, which of course will lead to fat storage. That's common sense. So we're not going to talk today in this short video about that. We're going to talk about how to navigate sugar addiction. This involves understanding three important things that we should remember when you approach your fasting routine, especially this is true if you are a sugar addict, if you are someone who whether you're overweight or not, you're a binger. I work with people in my consulting, and some of them are not overweight, they're just bingers. They're given to uh, sugar splurges like few understand them. And so, if that's you, you need to pay attention to these three simple things. Number one, don't overreact. Don't get on the bandwagon of hating on sugar like so many people do. They love to say, well, sugar's the real evil. They love to point out that the obesity problem with America and the rest of the world really started in the 1890s with the advent of soda and processed foods. Well, it's true. Nobody disputes it. Nobody disputes it. The problems come from too much sugar, but the fact of the matter is, sugar is brain food. It is found in many foods that you eat and some treats. And if you go around telling yourself sugar is evil, then you're shifting the blame. You're shifting the blame off you because you are evil. If anybody's evil, you are the one who's out of control, not the sugar. It is you who needs to not overreact. And of course, if you get on this bandwagon and of saying I can't deal with the fact that I can't have sugar, it's like looking at your ice cream and saying I can never have you again, ice cream. That's silly because it just creates the dieter's prison. It creates that sensation that things are never going to be normal again. Things are never going to be fun. You need to destroy that. And of course, that is why the idea of trigger foods needs to not be recognized, because a trigger food is only a trigger food if you allow it, if you are the gun. So don't make yourself a gun in this analogy here. Number two, remember that sugar is both an elixir. It is not a food. It is a drug. It's an elixir and a drug. That's not what our society teaches us, though. And this is one of those crazy things where you go, sugar's everywhere. But it's so everywhere that every little kid you see in the line when you're taking back your cable box, if you're moving or if you're just walking down the store to grab some grocery, you see some little chubby kids next to the aisle next to their parents, and their parents are buying them all kinds of junk food. It's literally everywhere. It's in every corner drugstore. It's in the vending machines all over the place. It's just everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. Contrast that with the hunter-gatherer times. Going back thousands of years, berries were a delicacy. Honey was a rarity, and when these things were found, they were used as a quick pick-me-up. They were used as a mental sharpener. But that is all. They were not abused the way we abuse them today. They understood, they didn't even understand, but their society was such that a hunter-gatherer society did not afford you delicacies like sugars. We can make sugars all over the place, so that's why everybody's sick and fat. That's why everybody's miserable. That's why everybody is obese and stuck in their houses, having to get emergency services to knock out the wall because they've let themselves go because sugar's so available, and it is cheaper than the protein alternatives. It's cheaper than any of the meats and the things that don't have carbs. So that little point there betrays the big understanding. It's a drug. So that's the first, and then now the second point. The third, when you're navigating sugar addiction, you need to remember to stop arguing with the inner child. I've seen parents do this in the supermarket. They'll sit there and they'll argue with the kid. The kid will say, I want this, and they'll say no. And then the kid will push them, and they'll say, well, why? And then they'll entreat them in the argument. When you are arguing with someone, you are entreating the possibility that they can get their way, that they could be right. If you are really serious about, if you believe something is true, you will not argue about it. You will not argue about it because there's no chance of the opposition being right. If you really believe that, then it's not an argument, it's not a debate. So how does this apply to sugar? Stop arguing about when and if you can have sugar. Set up your fasting plan to include reasonable amounts of treats and normal foods with sugar. Make sure you're happy with your choices, and then move inward into your plan. But you don't renegotiate during the meal. You negotiate before the meal, and you stick to it. You understand that there's a time not to argue. And when you're sitting there rethinking sugar, how many bites should I have? How many? That is a one-way ticket to failure, folks. By doing that, you can't do that. You set clear and definite rules. You do not go along and just coast and see if you're going to wind up on the better side of things. You don't let the kid teach the class. You don't let the kid pay the bills. You don't let the kid eat just cotton candy all the time because that's all they'd eat. Because they're children, they don't know any better. You have to be in the driver's seat. Your more cognizant, more observant, more aware self needs to come out and say what we've already mentioned. Sugar's a drug. Therefore, it should not be considered like green beans, mashed potatoes, and steak. Because it's not that type of food. It is a drug. So at some point, the crying is going to begin, and that little child is going to stomp its feet and want its way. But talk to yourself in those times. Yes, I can eat right now, but I'll be happier if I don't. Yes, I can eat right now, but I won't feel good about myself if I do. I can have it, just not now. Again, I've gone over this in other videos. If you really want to stay in control, you'll stop letting the inner child drive the car, and you'll start using the higher focus of the brain, realizing that the mindset is the problem, not the food itself. Food has never made anybody fat. No kind of food, nothing at all. It's the fact of the lack of control that the eater utilizes or has. That's what causes people to be fat. And if you can navigate sugar addiction, you can navigate every other aspect of fasting.